Diabetes Connections is brought to you by the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled insulin, by Dexcom, keeping you in control with an integrated system for diabetes management, and by VIVI Cap, protect your insulin in the heat or cold.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, infusion sets have always seemed like the weak link of pumping for us. What good is the best algorithm and state-of-the-art pump and CGM if the way it all attaches to the body is no good? New information shows infusion set failures happen more than you may think.
We saw data that showcased that up to 41% of people with diabetes were experiencing an infusion set failure at least once per month, which is approximately 1 out of every box of 10 infusion sets that you get. We understand that infusion set failure can not necessarily be the most damaging impact to a person with diabetes, but it can be very serious.
That's John Wilcox. His company DiaTech Diabetes has an infusion set failure detection system. He's going to explain what that is, how it works, and what you can do with the sets you have right now to make them work better. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome back to another week of the show. I am always so glad to have you here. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. I'm your host, Stacey Sims, and as this episode goes live on the 21st of February, the Dexcom G7 has been available in the US for a couple of days now, not a full week yet. I've seen a lot of folks on social media who have posted that they've ordered it, one or two who actually have been using it. We don't even plan to try to upgrade to it until it is compatible with the Tandem t:slim X2 pump, which is what my son uses. And from everything I've heard, of course, we've had the Dexcom CEO on the show. We've had people high up at Tandem here as well. They're saying probably end of summer, probably the fall. Omnipod 5 integration, probably not before then, but we will stay optimistic on both of those systems. It is worth noting, though, that the DIY Loop folks have already cracked this code, and the G7 is compatible with that non-commercial, non-FDA approved system. Although I guess to be technical, an earlier version of Loop was FDA approved because that is Tidepool Loop, which was approved a couple of weeks ago. All right, I'm getting way into the weeds here. I brought up the G7 for many reasons. First, I know it's top of mind for many of you, and we're actually going to talk to Dexcom again. I know you still have questions for them, so they're going to come back on and share some new information with us. And secondly, because I think it illustrates how some of the technology, these great automated insulin delivery systems, these amazing CGMs, are getting ahead of the basic part of the pumping infrastructure, and that's the infusion set. If you are very new here or you do not use an insulin pump, the infusion set is the way the pump attaches to the body. It's how insulin gets from the pump to under the skin. The set is what actually has the portion, the cannula, that goes under the skin. Tubed pumps have a couple of different types of sets that you can choose from, angled or straight or steel, usually. Omnipod has just one because it is all attached, but Omnipod certainly does have an infusion set. It's just part of the pod. Well, we have always used the straight angled infusion sets. We did experiment with longer cannulas, when Benny was using the most insulin ever during puberty. But we actually switched to untethered, as many of you know, for 2 years because the infusion sets just get overloaded. Cannulas can bend or they don't go in straight or correctly, and you think everything's fine. And then before you know it, you've got an occlusion alarm. So my guest this week wants to do something about that. John Wilcox lives with type 1. He was diagnosed at age 9, and he founded DiaTech to develop the world's first intelligent insulin pump infusion set system. He's going to tell us all about that in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Afrezza. And one of the most frustrating parts of mealtime insulin can be the need to pre-bolus. I've seen my son forget to do it, right? I mean, everybody forgets to do it. Or hesitate because he's not confident about meal timing in a restaurant or when he's out. Afrezza is unique because it is the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled insulin available. Once you breathe Afrezza into your lungs using the inhaler, insulin appears in your bloodstream in less than 1 minute, and it may start reducing blood sugar in about 12 minutes. Afrezza allows you to inhale your insulin right when food arrives, even unexpectedly, so you can be spontaneous but still in control without the need for injections at mealtime. Find out more and see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium, and is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety. John, thank you for joining me and spending some time with me and my listeners today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here and excited to have our conversation.
Yeah, let's just dive right in and talk about what problem are you trying to solve here? What is this all about?
Yeah, so currently I work as the CEO for DiaTech Diabetes, which is a small medical device startup. And we are a team of people with diabetes ourselves who are working on developing hardware and software solutions for insulin pump and automated insulin delivery users. And so for us, our current product is SmartFusion, and it is a software platform that helps better detect and predict infusion site failures with infusion sets. And so our goal with our technology is to better detect and predict when infusion failures like blockages, leakages, dislodgements from the body, improper insertions occur, to help people with diabetes know if they're not getting their life-saving medication, insulin. We're early stage, pre-FDA approved, and pre-revenue, but we're really excited about a lot of progress we made this past year, and looking forward to hopefully developing out the system for a clinical study this year.
So tell me a little bit more about what you mean, because people who use infusion sets, the vast majority of my listeners do use an insulin pump. So they understand that technology. I'm trying to picture what you mean by software that monitors it. I know Probably much of this is proprietary, but how do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we have developed our software platform in-house. Essentially, what this exists as for a person with diabetes is an improved infusion set detection algorithm that is going to be either on the insulin pump itself or available via an app that would be paired to the insulin pump. We've developed it out in certain ways so that it can easily integrate with insulin pumps that are already on the market. And really our customer is the insulin pump manufacturer who we're developing out the software for them to use within their pumps that they then sell to patients. This software takes a look at things like fluid flow, fluid pressure, blood glucose response to insulin infusions, and helps make that determination of whether or not a bolus of insulin has been infused correctly. We've been able to demonstrate the algorithm's efficacy within a preclinical study that we are actually just wrapping up now with the NIH. And when it comes to how people with diabetes will interact with this, again, this software is being developed to be on the pump that the person with diabetes would be using. So we're essentially trying to just make a more robust occlusion detection system that can not only just detect occlusions, but other types of failures as well.
All right. Super dumb question from someone whose child has used infusion sets for close to 16 years now.
Yeah.
How are occlusions detected now, and what will change? Because I'll be honest, John, when I first heard about this, I was imagining some kind of device or cover or additional piece of equipment that would be needed on the set itself. But that's not what's happening here.
No, actually, it's funny you say that because we started off developing out a infusion set with a fluid pressure sensor on it when we were getting started with this product. And we noticed that there was a lot of limitations when it came to manufacturability, as well as being able to make this be able to integrate with pumps on the market. So using that infusion set that we were building to integrate with pumps like Medtronic or Tandem, we took a step back and realized that the core value proposition of the system really was the software, and that we could achieve the same analysis using the current hardware systems on the pump. That's when we made that transition to just focus in on the software component of SmartFusion rather than developing out an external hardware piece. With that said,
The current occlusion system on most pumps relies on a pressure threshold. If you are infusing into a tissue, like your skin, and you start building a very high pressure because of an occlusion, that then triggers an alarm, and then the pump sends out a message saying like, hey, you have an occlusion, you need to change your set. Now, the thing about that type of system is that it cannot detect occlusions that are below that threshold. And it can also not detect other types of failures, which include leakages from the site, which may not trigger that occlusion alarm, as well as other ones that I mentioned, such as small kinks that can prevent insulin flow, and even getting ripped off your body or not being inserted properly. This produces kind of a need to try and make the occlusion alarm better to account for these different types of failures. And then also maybe be able to predict if a site is going to fail. That's really our goal with the system, is to utilize more than just fluid pressure data streams. And that's based off of a threshold. We're trying to incorporate other data streams and more sophisticated analysis of fluid pressure to better detect the different types of failures that a person with diabetes can experience when wearing a pump.
All right, dumb question again. John, I kind of hate to ask this, but how big a problem is this?
Yeah, it seems very significant to what we've been able to study. So we've been able to publish a couple posters on this with the American Diabetes Association, but people with pumps have reported that up to 97% of their infusion sets fail.
I'm sorry, 97%?
Yes, they've experienced an infusion set failure at least one time as a person with diabetes. Now, in regards to a reoccurrence, we saw data that showcased that up to 41% of people with diabetes were experiencing an infusion set failure at least once per month, which is approximately 1 out of every box of 10 infusion sets that you get. We understand that infusion set failure can not necessarily be the most damaging impact to a person with diabetes, but it can be very serious. We understand that infusion set failure can cause a longer time out of a person's time in range. This can cause diabetes ketoacidosis, and in severe cases, this has been fatal. So we really want to try and improve the detection capabilities of pumps for infusion set failure, not just because people currently with insulin pumps are experiencing this, but we also know for the future, automated insulin delivery is really trying to trend towards being completely automated. And so what better way to make that more effective than to have an improved failure detection system that can enable that automated insulin delivery. And that's really our future goal, is really to try and build out SmartFusion for automated insulin delivery platforms.
That's great. I don't know if you can answer this, and it's okay if you can't. Have you found in your studies that there are different types of pumps or different types of sets that work better or worse?
This is a really great question, and one that I think researchers in our space are really trying to tackle. It's really, I think, dependent on the person from what we've seen. Everybody's skin can be different and can be based off of many different factors, such as pre-existing scar tissuing, lipohypertrophy, BMI, site injection location for infusion sets. The real question is, how can we best help a person with diabetes select the infusion set that's best for their skin type? That is, again, another goal for SmartFusion, which is to be able to provide recommendations on what type of infusion set is best for a person to help them avoid infusion set failure. What we've seen in our studies kind of supports that. Depending on the tissue that we've been able to inject in, the density of the subcutaneous layer and the muscle layer that is below it can determine whether or not a 6 millimeter or a 9 millimeter length cannula would be best, whether a steel or a Teflon cannula is best for that subject. It's really dependent, I think, on being able to just see through data what is best for the person for their skin type. But I will say that there are studies out there that do suggest that certain types of cannulas are best for certain types of people, and there are recommendations that are provided by infusion set manufacturers for the different types of cannulas for what they believe is best for people with diabetes. So those recommendations do exist, but there's many different infusion set options out there for people. And so being able to help them select, again, their body type is something that we see as really valuable.
How'd you come up with this idea? I know you live with diabetes yourself. Did something happen along the way?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with diabetes at age 9. Really, it's kind of a funny startup founder story. My co-founders and I met in college and undergraduate at Florida State University around 2018. And at that time, I was doing some senior thesis research as an undergraduate student on infusion set failure occurrence and kind of looking into why this was happening for people with diabetes. And so we got together and started tinkering around with different hardware and different software solutions that we thought would be beneficial to help reduce the impact of infusion set failure for people with diabetes. This was kind of based off of not just myself experiencing infusion set failure, which I commonly do, but also because we were working with a pediatric endocrinology office located close to our school, and we're noticing that this was a pretty recurrent problem for children with diabetes that were wearing pumps. And then we got talking to other key opinion leaders within the space, knowing that this was a problem that was continuing to impact people with diabetes with pumps. So we thought, okay, maybe we can try and develop out something that, again, helps better predict and detect that these failures are occurring.
Did I read you were diagnosed on your birthday?
Yeah, I was. It was a great birthday present, right?
Oh, tell me about that.
Yeah, no, I was, like I said, turning 9, and I vividly remember being at a birthday party or preparing for that and having some cake and such, and just being like, wow, this is awful. I feel awful. I feel like I have the flu, and I'm very sick, obviously very thirsty and tired and going to the bathroom a lot. So that's when my parents took me to my general practitioner at that time. They tested my blood sugar, and it was like in the 800s. And so we then went on to the hospital where I was officially diagnosed and got to spend my birthday in the hospital. So that was definitely a memorable one. And I, since then have lived with diabetes now for about 17 years. Very passionate about the space. Really fell in love with the industry and with the research area and care, going into college, and have tried to dedicate my career so far to improving diabetes care for people with diabetes. So
I know it's very early, and we're talking still in the research study phase. But where do you hope this goes? As you said, you're talking to different pump companies. This is going to be, if it launches, and we hope it does, this would be part of the pump company world, I guess is what I'm trying to say. In other words, it's not a consumer product that we can buy as an add-on. I guess what I'm asking, John, is as best you can, and knowing that there's a lot of unknowns, can you kind of lay out what the future is here? Right back to John and the future of DiaTech. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And when we first started with Dexcom, it was back in December of 2013, almost 10 years ago. And Share and Follow was just not an option. They hadn't come out with the apps for that yet. So I know what I'm talking about when I say using Share and Follow makes a big difference. I just think it's really important to talk to the person you're following, or sharing with, and get comfortable with how you want everyone to use the system. Even if you're following your young child, these are great conversations to have. At what numbers will you text? How long will you wait to call? That sort of thing. And that way the whole system gives everybody real peace of mind. And what I absolutely love about Dexcom Share is helping Benny, mostly when he was younger, with blood glucose issues using data from the whole day and night, not just one moment. Internet connectivity is required to access separate Dexcom Follow app. To learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Now back to John Wilcox talking about what's next for DiaTech Diabetes.
We actually have 2 pump manufacturers that we've officially partnered with for our preclinical studies, and we're hopeful that we can move forward with one of those for clinical study of SmartFusion's algorithm this year. And we, again, expect for SmartFusion to exist as a complementary add-on feature to the existing pump. And so pump manufacturers who we would then license or sell our technology via M&A would then incorporate that into their system and then sell pumps with SmartFusion to people with diabetes. So sort of like an Intel Inside almost kind of concept. And, for us, our next steps are going through a clinical study that we can submit for an FDA or European clearance. And that's going to be based off of what the manufacturer would like for us to do. But we would expect SmartFusion to be able to be sold alongside pump manufacturers, improving their infusion set failure detection following that regulatory approval. And timeline-wise, we're looking still at about a 1 to 2 year process of getting through that clinical study and submitting to the regulatory agencies. And so once we receive that approval, SmartFusion would be set to be sold alongside those pumps. And then people with diabetes can make that choice if they want to use that system with SmartFusion on it.
Can you share which pump companies you have the agreements with?
I wish I cannot, though, at this time, but we're really excited about both of them. They're great companies. That's really all I can say. So stay tuned, and hopefully we can get the system available to all pump manufacturers. That's our real goal. But we do understand that this is a technology that could be providing a competitive edge for a single manufacturer. So as a startup, we're open to licensing this out to as many manufacturers as possible, of course.
So again, another dumb question. I should have asked this off the top. Can this be used with tubed pumps and with patch style pumps?
Yes. To our current development, we have been able to show the efficacy of our system with both those types of pumps. And so our preclinical studies today have only been able to showcase efficacy with tube pumps. But I will say that the two manufacturers that we have, one is a tube pump and one is a tubeless pump manufacturer.
Talking about all this, I'm thinking about our experiences. Benny rarely gets occlusions, which is great, but he had one at the dinner table the other day. And it's so frustrating, right? Because he's sitting there, he's given himself insulin before he's eating. And then, the alarms are going off and listen, I'm hesitating because the end of the story is he was like, I'm eating, I'm going to fix this after. We're far from perfect. And he went ahead and did that and cleared it all up. Are you looking to hear from people, and I laugh because, we're far from perfect, people like us, but are you looking to hear from people about their experiences still? Like, is there a place where patients can say, yes, I want this, or I think this is an issue, that kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely. I think that, hearing everyone's experiences with their insulin pumps is super important at any development stage of a technology because that helps guide how technology is built. I'm a very firm believer in that. And so when it comes to hearing people's stories about infusion site failure and problems that they might have with their infusion sets, we're always willing and open to have those conversations and learn from people. I can direct those people who might be interested to reach out to our website, which has some contact information there that they can use to connect either with one of our team members. And these conversations don't have to be for publication research. It can just be for, hearing perspectives that can support, again, the development of SmartFusion. So we're always willing to connect. And again, our website is a great way for that, to hear those stories.
Until this technology comes out, is there anything that you've learned along the way that can help people avoid occlusions now? Any best practices that we may not have been taught or may not know about for using infusion sets?
Yeah, I really strongly believe that a really big lesson that I've learned is just really paying attention to your blood glucose levels at the end of the wear cycle for infusion sets. If you're noticing that your blood sugar is, and again, this is not medical advice, I have to, of course, make that a statement, but when you're utilizing your infusion sets and an insulin pump and you're getting close to the day 3 wear period, and you're really seeing that your blood sugars are responding to insulin boluses, despite your pump not telling you to change, it might be a good idea to, go ahead and change your infusion set. And I think it is also really important to note that you should take some time to pay attention to your cannula insertion site, especially for people who use infusion sets that have, of course, the little windows that you can see where the cannula is going into the body. And, if you're noticing that your blood glucose levels aren't responding, you might be having a leak. And, you might be able to see that on the adhesive pad of the insulin pump. So it might be good to, just check your infusion sites ever so often, and know that they can fail, and that just having that awareness is important when utilizing insulin pumps. So definitely kind of having a heightened awareness as you're getting close to the end of your wear period is very important.
Have you changed the way, and I'm getting very nosy here, have you changed the way you insert? I mean, we've learned over the years quite a few tips and tricks with the different infusion sets that my son has used. I'm curious if your insertion methods, assuming you use an insulin pump, have changed.
Yeah, I do. No, yeah. So I am very, I think, aware of where I'm putting my pumps. Injection site and infusion site rotation, I think, is so critical. Being able to avoid, obviously, areas that you've injected into in the last infusion set wear period is extremely important. And so I think just going through this time of working with DiaTech has really almost improved my infusion site rotation. I used to be very in one spot all the time. And now looking back, I can kind of even see some residual skin, not damage, but there is noticeable difference in my skin in that location. And so now I've been really intentional about putting my infusion sites in other parts of my body to avoid any sort of dermatological impact from injecting insulin in there like 24/7. I've changed my infusion sites. I've made them more to rotate and try and be aware that injecting in the same spot could maybe lead to some complications.
Okay, before I let you go, John, give me the big dream for the company. Give me the big picture for what you'd like to see happen.
Wow, yeah, no, that's not a dumb question at all. It's something I contemplate almost every day and existential. I really think that, DiaTech has been such an awesome entry point into the industry. And my ultimate goal is to continue to work with people with diabetes for my career. So for DiaTech, of course, though, I think for us to be able to successfully deploy SmartFusion with a partnered insulin pump manufacturer and then result in that licensing or sale of our technology, that's the ultimate goal for us. And we're very hopeful that we can do that here within the next couple of years. Once that's done, there's other opportunities, I think, for everybody that's on our team. I can't speak for my co-founders, but for myself, I'm also wrapping up a master's in diabetes education and management at Columbia University right now, in addition to managing DiaTech. And, I'm the prospects of going back to a higher graduate level degree focused in diabetes care or working for a industry player is something that I'm not opposed to. So I'm, again, setting myself up for a lifelong career, hopefully in diabetes care. And whether that's through graduate school or working in the field, that's either of those is really what my goal is after DiaTech. And I know that's not super specific, but I definitely want to keep working within this field. It's an amazing field. Everyone in it that we've met and interacted with are super passionate, and it's just a great community, of course.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining me. I can't imagine how busy you are with all of this and finishing your degree as well. Keep us posted. Come on back when you can talk more about this, and we'll definitely be following. Thank you so much.
Yes, no, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. And again, if anybody has any questions or would like to connect, our website is a great place to do that, which is DiaTechDiabetes.com.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacy Sims.
More information about DiaTech. In fact, they are presenting at ATTD, that big conference happening this week, actually. This is the Advanced Technologies and Treatments for Diabetes conference. It means we'll probably be getting some news or at least a peek at some studies from these companies. So depending on what comes out, I may do an extra newscast this month. We will see. But I know DiaTech is going to be there. I wanted to talk a little bit more about technology, but as it pertains to diabetes camp, we had a really interesting discussion in my local group recently, and I feel like something is changing in a very interesting way. So I'm going to talk to you about that in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by VIVI Cap. VIVI Cap is a thermal insulin pen carrying case. It really is amazing. It keeps your insulin at the exact right temperature, even in extreme heat or cold. Super easy to use. You take off the cap of whatever brand insulin pen you use. Then you put the activated, there's like a little button you press first, VIVI Cap on top of the pen, and you use that as the cap. It's slightly bulkier, but super sleek, easy to use, lasts for years, and it fits all insulin pens. I did get a question. They are working on one for vials. Right now it is just for pens. We have our doctor write a backup prescription for insulin pens, and so we always have one of those. It really makes it easy, and I love the VIVI Cap because we can just throw it in Benny's bag. This time of year here in Charlotte, temperature's great, but in just a couple of weeks, it's going to start getting hot. And he spends all summer outside on the go at camp, and this works really well. Check it out at diabetes-connections.com. Click on the VIVI Cap logo. It will take you to all of the discounts you can get. You can also see that link in our show notes. Find those at diabetes-connections.com on the homepage of this episode or wherever you are listening. Many of you know I run a very large parent group in the Charlotte, North Carolina area where I live. It's a big Facebook group. We do in-person meetups. It's what led me to create Diabetes Connections Mom's Night Out. And by the way, I have an announcement coming very soon about more cities. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about Mom's Night Out. But that is not what I want to talk about right here. I want to talk about a discussion we had about camp. We had so many questions in our local Facebook group when our local sleepaway diabetes camps opened up for registration that I popped on a Zoom and we had an hour-long discussion with, veteran parents who'd sent their kids for years to these camps and new parents who were just starting to think about it. And one issue came up, and it's not what I thought. In years past, one of the first questions was, can I follow my child? Can I use CGM remote monitoring while they're at camp? And I know a lot of people immediately dismiss that as helicoptering or, that's bad parenting. But these are folks who are given a Dexcom and share and follow when their child is diagnosed in the hospital. So imagine you've had that technology since day one of diagnosis. I believe it's a great question to ask. And it isn't always asked in a way that why can't I have it? They're asking about it. And it's a great time to explain about independence and giving yourself a break and all of that. Sometimes it doesn't go so well, right? But usually it does. But the big question this year was, can my child bring their phone to camp to control their AID system? That's how far we've come, that we have two systems now that are potentially controlled by phone. Omnipod 5, controlled by some phones, and the t:slim X2, the tandem pump, Control-IQ, controlled by some phones. Benny uses bolus by phone all the time. And I guess Tandem is a little different in that the only thing you can do with your phone is bolus, whereas Omnipod 5 has full control from some phones. But that'll change in the future for Tandem. And I thought, two things. What a great question. How great for these kids, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, these poor camps now have something else to deal with. So of course, my answer as a mom and not a camp staffer was, you're going to have to ask the individual camps what their policies are. My guess is that most of these camps are just going to say, yes, but you have to have your child's phone on airplane or whatever the setting is to make sure that they don't have access to it as a phone. I mean, I think camp is a great time for no screens and that kind of thing. To me, that's not too difficult to question. But at the same time, does the camp want to be liable for if the phone gets lost, destroyed, wet? As a parent, I would not want my child to have that responsibility. So I would say to my kid, look, for this week, you have to physically use the pump for t:slim users. For Omnipod, we're giving you the locked down controller that came with it. I wouldn't want my kid to think for a minute about worrying about destroying their phone at camp. Now, of course, longtime listeners know that is also because Benny basically destroys whatever he brings to camp, including his insulin pump and his hand. He broke his, I shouldn't joke, he smashed his insulin pump last summer. Of course, Tandem sent him a new one. It's under warranty. And he fractured his pinky. I don't remember the technical term from it, but I say he broke his hand at camp. No warranty on that, but he did okay with it. Oh my goodness, that kid. So if you're listening and you are a diabetes camp staffer and you're making these decisions, I would love to hear from you. I'll keep it anonymous if you want. Let me know what your camp is thinking about. Because, we've talked to some camps that are there's a system out there that can monitor all the kids at camp via Dexcom. They can follow everybody. There are some camps that still say, no technology, no phones. But I think most of them are going to fall somewhere in the middle here this year. I'm actually going to see some of the local camp folks this weekend, our JDRF here in North Carolina. Yeah, just one chapter for the whole state. They have their summit in Greensboro, so I'll be up there speaking this weekend. I'm going to ask the camp folks about that, and I'll poll some more parents to see what they think. In the meantime, unless something bananas happens, no newscast this week. That will happen again next Friday. but we will have our regular interview episode coming up on Tuesday. The easiest way to keep track of all this is to not keep track of it. Just subscribe to Diabetes Connections wherever you get podcasts. Of course, it is subscribe for free. They call it follow on some apps and subscribe on others. But you never have to pay to get this show. If anybody wants to charge you for it, please let me know because that's a scam. And I never signed on to it. But we are everywhere that you can get your podcasts. And when you follow or subscribe, it automatically shows up on your phone. So if I have a newscast, it'll be there. If I have a special announcement, it'll be there. And you will never miss. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I will see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.